Prologue, The Eternal Spiral. The world of Spira was beautiful and broken. Blue oceans kissed golden shores, skies burned with the crimson glow of eternal sunsets, and mountains pierced the heavens like jagged spears. But beneath that beauty lay a truth etched in blood and tears, the spiral of death. For 1,000 years, the people of Spira had lived under the shadow of one name, sin. A monster of impossible scale, born from the arrogance of men, it wandered the seas like a god of vengeance, leaving cities shattered, lives stolen, and hope in ruins. It was said that sin could not be killed, that every attempt, every triumph, every prayer only delayed the inevitable. Its existence was punishment for the sins of the past. And so the people prayed to the teachings of Yevon, clinging to rituals, to temples, to a fragile dream that one day peace might last more than a heartbeat. But peace was a lie, always temporary, always bought with blood. This is the story of a young man who did not belong in this world, and how he changed everything. This is the story of Final Fantasy X. Chapter 1, The Last Night in Zanarkand.
Can I have your autograph?
Of course.
Good luck tonight!
Nothing to worry about.
Can you sign this?
No prob.
Please?
Alrighty.
Me too!
Take it easy.
The crowd roared like a storm as lights blazed across the colossal dome of the Zanarkand Stadium. Thousands of fans screamed one name, their voices trembling with feverish devotion. Tidus! He stood there, grinning like a star, golden hair catching the floodlights, blue eyes burning with that familiar fire. Tonight he wasn't just a player, he was a god of the blitzball arena. The music pounded, the cheers rolled like thunder, and the world was perfect. At least, for a moment. Man, they really love me, Tidus muttered under his breath, tugging his gloves tighter. He signed autographs as he walked, flashing his usual cocky grin to fans pressing against the rails. Don't worry, Zanarkand Abes are taking this one home. For you guys. The laughter, the cameras, the lights, it was all so alive, so bright. Too bright to notice the shadows gathering at the edge of everything. That night's match was like any other. A dance of speed and grace inside a sphere of water suspended by technology older than history. Tidus cut through the water like lightning, the ball spinning from his foot in a perfect arc toward the goal. Victory was certain. Until the world ended. It began with a tremor, a low rumble that shivered through the dome, silencing the crowd for the briefest second before an explosion tore through the sky. The arena shook, steel groaned like a dying beast, and then a flash of light so blinding it swallowed the stars. What the hell was that? Tidus didn't even have time to scream before the stadium walls crumbled like sand. The water sphere collapsed, and players tumbled in a torrent of chaos. Panic erupted, people ran, people fell, and then it appeared, a shadow. No, a mountain of shadows rolling across the city like a living apocalypse. Its form defied reason, a titanic shell wreathed in flames and darkness, crowned with spines like the bones of a fallen god. Its roar shattered glass, toppled towers, and ripped the very breath from 1,000 lungs. Seen, Tidus stood frozen as his world, his perfect neon city of dreams, burned. And then he saw him, a man in crimson, standing calm amidst the chaos, his single arm resting inside his sleeve, a jug of sake hanging from his other hand. His presence was like a blade in the dark, sharp and unyielding. "You are still alive," the man said, his voice low and cold, though the chaos roared around them. "Good. Come with me if you want to live." "Auron?" Tidus stumbled toward him, heart hammering like a drum. "What's happening?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he pointed toward the impossible terror swallowing Zanarkand whole.
This is your story. It all begins here.
And with that, the nightmare consumed them. Chapter 2: The Fall and the Sea of Nightmares. The streets of Zanarkand were chaos. Screams tore through the night as buildings collapsed like sandcastles under the weight of tidal waves. Fire and water swallowed the neon paradise, painting the skyline in crimson and ash. Tidus ran, heart slamming against his ribs, eyes wide as panic clawed at his throat. This isn't real. This can't be real. He stumbled through shattered glass and twisted metal, desperate to find a way out, a way back to normal. But normal was gone. And then, there he was again. Auron, standing calm, like a phantom of war, while the world disintegrated around him. His crimson cloak whipped in the hurricane winds, his face shadowed beneath silver hair and that ever-present grim line of a mouth. "Auron!" Tidus shouted, voice cracking, as another explosion rocked the city. "What the hell is happening?" Auron turned, his single visible eye gleaming cold and steady. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. He simply jerked his chin, motioning Tidus to follow. The ground shuddered violently. Cracks split the streets as if some ancient beast clawed its way from the underworld. And then, with a sound like the roar of gods, it emerged. From the ocean's heart rose the monster, a living cataclysm. Seen, its grotesque form dwarfed the tallest towers, its jagged fins slicing the storm-churned skies. Lightning danced along its massive shell, and its maw opened in a scream that shattered the night into shards of terror. Tidus froze, breath ripped from his lungs. For a heartbeat, he was a child again, powerless before the sheer scale of this nightmare. "Move!" Auron's voice was steel, cutting through the paralysis. He grabbed Tidus by the arm and dragged him forward. They ran, through streets breaking apart, through wind that felt like razors, past faces twisted in fear and despair. Tidus's mind screamed for answers, but his legs only obeyed the primal instinct to survive. And then the sky itself fell. A wave, a wall of water taller than mountains, smashed into the city. Steel, glass, and flesh vanished beneath its wrath. Zanarkand was no more. Auron stopped at the edge of a shattered bridge. Below them churned a vortex of impossible energy, a maelstrom that pulsed with the same unnatural light as seen. Tidus stared, breathless, as Auron unsheathed his massive katana with a sound like thunder. "Listen," Auron said, his voice eerily calm amid the apocalypse. "There is no time. We go into the beyond." "What?" Tidus staggered back. "Are you insane? That thing will kill us." Auron's eye fixed on him. There was no fear there, only inevitability. "This is your story." And then the world broke apart. The vortex tore them from reality, pulling them through a kaleidoscope of light and darkness, sound and silence, like drowning in the void between dreams. Tidus fought to scream, but his voice was stolen by the current. He reached for Auron, and for an instant their hands met, then slipped apart. Everything became water, endless, suffocating water. When Tidus opened his eyes, there were no lights, no city, no Auron, only a sea of night stretching to infinity. He was alone. Chapter 3: The Girl from the Sea. Darkness. Not the gentle dark of night, but an endless crushing blackness that pressed in from all sides, heavy as chains. Tidus drifted through it like a broken doll, his body limp, mind scattered across fragments of memory. Neon lights, screaming fans, his mother's face when he was a boy, laughing on a sunlit pier. They flickered like shards of glass in a storm, cutting deeper with every breath he didn't take. Is this death? He opened his mouth to scream, but water rushed in, cold and bitter, flooding his lungs like liquid knives. Panic ignited. He clawed at nothing, kicking hard, searching for air, for light, for anything. His heartbeat thundered in his skull, deafening, desperate. Then a glow. Faint, shimmering like a distant star, rippling through the black. He reached for it with trembling arms, legs burning as he swam toward salvation. Closer, closer. With a violent gasp, Tidus broke the surface, coughing up seawater in great heaving spasms. His chest burned as he dragged in the air, thick, salty, humid. The sky above was a storm of bruised clouds, bruised purple and grey, swirling in ominous spirals. The ocean rolled endlessly around him, a heaving, merciless expanse. No lights, no Zanarkand, no Auron. Only the roar of waves and his own ragged breathing. No, 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 Tidus whispered, voice raw, eyes darting across the horizon. Where is everyone? The panic clawed up his spine like a beast. His mind scrambled for reason. An accident? A dream? Some kind of hallucination? None of it fit. His city was gone, wiped away like chalk in the rain. And then, through the rolling fog, something loomed, a tower of jagged stone jutting from the sea, like the broken tooth of some ancient titan. At its base, fragments of ruin clung to the rock, skeletal remains of a forgotten temple. Hope, thin and trembling, flickered in his chest. He swam. For what felt like an eternity, he fought the waves until his arms screamed and his legs turned to lead. When at last he dragged himself onto the craggy shore, he collapsed face first onto cold stone, every breath a knife in his ribs. Minutes, hours passed before he could move again. When he did, he lifted his head and stared. Ruins. Vast, desolate ruins sprawled before him, draped in moss and seaweed, their shapes alien, yet hauntingly familiar. Broken spires clawed at the sky, carvings etched into the stone told stories in a language he didn't know, their edges worn by 1,000 storms. The silence was deafening. What is this place?" he murmured, voice hoarse. His breath curled in the damp air, mingling with the mist rising from the waves. Hunger gnawed at his gut. His throat was raw from salt water. The cold seeped deep into his bones. Alone and broken, Tidus stumbled through the ruins, searching for shelter. That's when the sky screamed. A roar, deep, primal, unlike anything human, rolled across the ocean, shaking the stones beneath his feet. The clouds twisted violently, and the sea convulsed as if some monstrous hand stirred its depths. Tidus spun, heart slamming against his ribs, and saw them. Shapes rising from the water, dozens of them. Creatures slick with slime and scales, their eyes glowing with a hungry alien light. Their bodies writhed like eels, armored in jagged bone. Each movement was wrong, too sharp, too fast, too alive. They crawled across the rocks toward him, hissing through needle teeth. "Oh, come on," Tidus muttered, backing away, hands trembling as the first monster lunged. Instinct took over. He snatched a broken length of metal from the ground, a rusted sword, half buried in sand, and swung with everything he had. The blade screeched across armored hide, sparks flying. The creature recoiled with an ear-splitting shriek, then lunged again. Tidus fought like a man possessed, every strike fueled by sheer terror. But there were too many. The swarm pressed in, circling like sharks, driving him back toward the edge of the ruin. His muscles burned, his grip slipped. The blade tore from his hands and clattered across the stone. And then, light. A thunderclap split the sky, and a blazing sphere of energy slammed into the nearest beast, vaporizing it in a scream of fire and smoke. Another blast followed, and another, tearing through the swarm in a storm of explosions. Tidus fell to his knees, shielding his eyes from the glare. Through the smoke, a shape emerged, a figure clad in green and black, wearing goggles that gleamed like twin suns. Her hair shone golden beneath the stormlight, braided tight, dancing in the wind like ribbons of flame. She moved with lethal grace, a dancer in a ballet of destruction, twin pistols spitting death in perfect rhythm. One by one, the monsters fell, until the last screeched and dissolved into the sea. Silence returned, broken only by the hiss of steam. The girl holstered her weapons and turned. Her eyes, strange, luminous, locked on Tidus. For a heartbeat, the storm ceased to matter. He stared, wide-eyed, gasping, as if the world itself had sent an angel. She tilted her head, lips curving into a grin that was equal parts mischief and relief. "You're alive," she said, her voice low and quick, tinged with an accent he didn't know. "Good. Thought I was too late." Tidus blinked, trying to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. "Who are you?" She offered a gloved hand, her smile widening. "Name's Riku. And if you want to stay that way..." She jerked her chin toward the horizon, where the clouds boiled with something vast and hungry. "You'd better come with me." Chapter 4. Beneath the Surface. Tidus stumbled after her, still trying to catch his breath. His legs felt like they belonged to someone else, rubbery, weak. But something about this girl's voice, her sharp, fearless presence, pulled him forward. They didn't speak as she guided him across the slick, ruined stones, down toward the shore where a strange metal craft floated. Not a boat, not a ship. Something far older, mechanical, hissing with steam and pulsing faintly with light. Tidus hesitated. "What is that thing?" he asked, his voice breaking slightly, part awe, part fear. She looked back at him over her shoulder, goggles glinting. "Your ride. Unless you'd rather swim back to wherever you came from." He swallowed hard and followed her into the craft. Inside, the air smelled of oil, salt, and something metallic, like ozone after a lightning strike. Strange glyphs flickered across screens that lined the narrow chamber. Figures moved in the half-light, other people dressed in similar strange gear, faces obscured by goggles and masks, speaking in a language that was harsh and fast, full of clicks and strange syllables. Tidus froze. Their voices were alien, and for a heartbeat, panic flared in his chest. "Where the hell am I? Who are these people?" Riku must have noticed because she touched his arm gently, a grounding gesture, her green eyes softening. "Relax. They're with me. You're safe." "Safe?" Tidus laughed weakly, the sound hollow. "My whole city just disappeared. Monsters tried to eat me. I don't even know what's happening." Riku's expression flickered, something unreadable passing across her face. "You really don't know, do you?" she said softly, almost to herself. Before he could answer, the craft shuddered violently, throwing Tidus against the wall. Lights flashed crimson. A harsh alarm wailed through the cabin. "Fiends!" one of the masked figures shouted in that strange tongue. The water outside churned, and through a small round viewport, Tidus saw them. More of those nightmare creatures, swarming through the depths, like a living cloud. Riku grabbed a pair of strange mechanical gauntlets and tossed a weapon toward Tidus, a curved blade etched with markings he didn't recognize. "Hope you can fight," she said, pulling her goggles down over her eyes. "Because they're coming in." The ship lurched as something struck its hull, metal screaming in protest. Then the walls burst inward, seawater flooding in with a deafening roar. Tidus barely had time to raise the blade before the first fiend lunged. What followed was chaos. Steel clanged. Gunfire echoed in the narrow corridors, and Tidus fought like a man cornered by fate itself. His body remembered every movement from years of blitz training, the way to twist, to dodge, to strike in fluid arcs. His blade tore through scaled flesh as he spun and ducked, heart pounding. Beside him, Riku fought with terrifying precision, her gauntlets flaring with bursts of lightning that sent creatures thrashing in agony. For every fiend that fell, two more seemed to take its place. The ship groaned, listing hard to starboard. Tidus's lungs burned, every breath a ragged gasp as water rose to his knees, then his waist. "We have to get out," he shouted over the din. "We will," Riku snapped back, blasting another creature apart with a flash of blue-white light. "But we need the salvage first." "Salvage?" Tidus nearly slipped as the floor tilted further. "We're about to drown." But she didn't answer. She and the others pushed deeper into the ship's flooded heart toward a massive sealed chamber. Strange glyphs pulsed along its edges, glowing brighter as Riku keyed in commands on a panel. The door hissed open, revealing a colossal sphere, a machine ancient and beautiful, its surface humming with a sound that resonated in Tidus's bones. "What is that thing?" he breathed, awestruck. "Later," Riku barked, grabbing his wrist. "Help me move it." Together they fought to stabilize the device, locking it into a set of clamps as the chamber shook from another impact. "That's it," Riku shouted to the others in their strange tongue. "Get us out of here." The crew scrambled back toward the exit, but then came the worst sound of all, the groan of metal snapping under pressure. A wall gave way. The sea crashed in, a black tidal wave that swallowed everything. Tidus was ripped from Riku's grasp, thrown end over end in the dark, his scream lost in the rush of water. He fought to swim to find the surface, but the current dragged him deeper, spinning him into the abyss. His last sight before blackness claimed him was Riku's outstretched hand, reaching desperately through the storm. Chapter 5: The Island of Prayers. He woke to the sound of waves, not the crashing fury of a storm, but a softer rhythm, the lazy push and pull of a calm tide. For a moment he lay still, his body heavy, his mind floating between worlds. Then memory slammed into him. The ship, the monsters. Riku's hand slipping away, he bolted upright, coughing hard, spitting seawater. Sunlight stabbed his eyes. The warmth of it was shocking after the cold dark of the depths, almost unreal. He was lying on a pale beach, the sand fine and white, glittering like powdered glass. Palms swayed gently in the breeze. The sky above was impossibly blue, dotted with lazy clouds that drifted toward the horizon. It was beautiful, heartbreakingly so, and yet utterly alien. He stood shakily, every muscle sore, and looked around. No sign of the strange ship, no sign of Riku. Alone, again. A shout rang out behind him, startling him so badly he spun with fists raised. A group of men stood on the shore, tanned from sun and salt, dressed in loose, brightly colored garments. Their hair was braided or tied back, beads and shells glinting in the sunlight. They spoke rapidly in a language Tidus couldn't understand, gesturing toward him. "Hey, I don't..." Tidus tried, backing up a step. The men approached cautiously, though none of them seemed threatening. If anything, they looked curious, concerned. One of them, tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bleached hair and a kind, easy grin, stepped forward. "You okay, Bruder?" the man asked in a thick accent, switching to a language Tidus could barely follow. Slower, careful words, like someone speaking to a lost child. Relief flooded Tidus's chest. Finally, someone he could talk to. Where am I?" Tidus asked, voice trembling slightly. The man chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "This Besaid island," he said simply. Then, seeing Tidus's blank expression, he added, "You not from here, yeah?" "Not even close," Tidus muttered. The man's grin widened. "I'm Waka. Come, we get you some food, some water. You look like you fight with the ocean and lose, yeah?" Tidus almost laughed, almost, but the weight of everything that had happened pressed down too heavily. Still, he let Waka lead him off the beach and into the village. Besaid was like something from a dream. Wooden huts clustered beneath swaying palms, children ran laughing between the houses, and women hung bright cloths to dry in the sun. There was a stillness here, a peace that felt strange after the nightmare of Zanarkand's fall. But what caught Tidus's eye most was the temple. It stood at the heart of the village, carved from stone dark as night, its roof rising like a prayer to the sky. Strange glyphs glowed faintly on its surface, and even from a distance, Tidus felt its gravity, as though the whole village orbited this single sacred place. "Temple of Yevon," Waka said, noticing Tidus staring. "Our place of prayer." We owe everything to Yevon. Teachings keep us safe, keep Scene away. That name again, Scene, the monster that had destroyed his home. You mean that thing? Tidus asked, fists clenching. You're telling me some temple is supposed to stop it? Waka frowned, but his tone stayed gentle. Easy now, yeah? Teachings tell us Scene is punishment for our past. Live by Yevon's ways, we find peace. That's how it is. Tidus wanted to argue, to scream that this was insane, but exhaustion crushed the fight from him. Come on, Waka said, patting him on the shoulder. You hungry? I can see it. After we eat, I show you the village, yeah? Food and water dulled the edge of his fear, but it wasn't until nightfall that he saw her. The village gathered outside the temple as the great doors opened and a small group stepped out, led by a young woman dressed in white and blue robes. She was radiant. Her brown hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, a single lock braided with beads. Her eyes, one the clear, gentle blue of a summer sky, the other the grassy plains of a beautiful meadow. In her hands, she held a staff crowned with a symbol that glowed faintly in the dusk. The crowd bowed their heads. Even Waka lowered his gaze, murmuring something like a prayer. Tidus, transfixed, simply stared. Who is she? He whispered. That Yuna, Waka said softly, almost reverently. Our summoner. The word meant nothing to Tidus, but the weight of it was clear. This girl was important, not just to the village, but somehow instinctively to him. Yuna lifted her staff, smiled gently at the people gathered, and for a moment the whole island seemed to exhale. For the first time since Zanarkand burned, Tidus felt something he had thought was gone forever. Hope. Chapter 5.5, Starlight on Besaid, an interlude. The crowd slowly dispersed after Yuna's return from the temple, voices hushed, as though afraid to disturb the quiet magic of the evening. Tidus lingered on the edge of the square, watching her as she spoke softly to the villagers. Her smile warm but humble. Something about her presence was grounding. He didn't know why, but for the first time since Zanarkand, he wasn't thinking about what he'd lost. Only about this moment. When the last of the villagers drifted away, Yuna noticed him standing there, half hidden in the shadows. She tilted her head, curious, then approached with a gentle step, staff in hand. You're the newcomer, she said softly, her voice carrying like a melody over the quiet square. Tidus blinked, caught off guard. Yeah, he said, scratching the back of his head. Name's Tidus. Her smile brightened, though there was a shyness to it that made his chest tighten unexpectedly. I'm Yuna, she said. I heard Waka found you on the shore. You must have been through a lot. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. He wanted to tell her everything, about Zanarkand, about Auron, about the monster that had swallowed his world whole. But the words stuck in his throat. Yeah, he said finally, his voice quieter than he expected. You could say that. Yuna studied him for a moment, her expression thoughtful, then gestured toward the path leading away from the village. Come, she said, the night sky here is beautiful. It always helps me think. He hesitated only a moment before following her. They climbed a gentle slope until they reached a small bluff overlooking the ocean. The stars stretched endlessly above them, mirrored in the still waters below. The sound of waves lapping the shore was like a lullaby. Yuna sat on a smooth rock, setting her staff beside her. Tidus sat a few feet away, feeling strangely nervous, which was ridiculous. He was the star player of the Zanarkand Abes. He'd never been nervous around anyone. You're not from here, Yuna said after a moment, her tone soft, curious but not prying. No, Tidus admitted, looking up at the stars. My home, it's gone now. Yuna's gaze lowered, sympathy flickering across her face. I'm sorry, she said gently. Spira can be A hard place. But you survived. That means something. He glanced at her, surprised by the quiet conviction in her voice. You talk like you know what it's like, he said. Yuna's smile was wistful. Everyone in Spira knows what it's like, she said. To lose someone, to keep going, even when it hurts. There was a silence between them then, not heavy, but full of unspoken things. The ocean breeze lifted Yuna's hair, carrying the faint scent of salt and flowers. Tidus lay back on the grass, staring up at the sky. In Zanarkand, he said slowly, the lights from the city are so bright, you can hardly see the stars at all. But here, it feels like the whole sky is watching. Yuna tilted her head, her expression softening. I like to think that's where the ones we've lost go, she said quietly. Up there, watching over us. He turned to look at her, something in his chest tightening. Then I guess my whole city's up there right now, he said with a crooked smile. Yuna giggled softly, a sound like bells. Then they must be cheering for you, she said, wherever you go next. For the first time in what felt like forever, Tidus smiled, a real smile. Thanks, he said softly. The two of them sat there a while longer, talking about nothing and everything. About the sea, about the stars, about little things that didn't hurt to remember. When they finally stood to return to the village, the fear that had been coiled tight in Tidus's chest since the fall of Zanarkand had loosened, just a little. And for the first time, he thought that maybe he wasn't completely alone after all. Chapter 6. The Summoner's Pilgrimage. The night was quiet when they returned to the village. A few lanterns still glowed near the temple, their flames swaying gently in the breeze. Yuna offered him a soft smile before slipping away to her home, leaving Tidus standing in the square with Waka. You should rest, Waka said, clapping him on the shoulder. Big day tomorrow. Big day? Tidus asked, raising an eyebrow. We start practice, Waka said, grinning. Blitzball tournament coming up in Luca. We need all the help we can get, ya. Tidus blinked. Blitzball. The word hit him like a spark in the dark. Wait, there's blitzball here? Waka chuckled at his wide-eyed expression. Of course, Spira's favorite sport. You'll see tomorrow, but first, rest. You look like you'll fall over. He wasn't wrong. Tidus's body ached with exhaustion. Waka guided him to a small hut where a bedroll was laid out. Tidus lay there for a long while, staring up at the wooden ceiling, the sounds of the ocean faint outside. Sleep came, but it was restless. He dreamed of Zanarkand, of the stadium lights blazing, of the crowd roaring, of Aryan standing at the edge of the field, watching silently. Then the dream twisted. The lights shattered, the water sphere collapsed, and scene rose again, its roar shaking the dream apart. When Tidus jolted awake, sweat damp on his brow, the sky outside was just beginning to pale with dawn. Waka was waiting for him outside. You're up early, Waka said, yawning. Good. Before we go to practice, there's something you should see. He led Tidus to the temple. Inside, the air was cool and heavy with incense. Strange symbols glowed faintly along the walls. Statues of serene, robed figures watched silently from alcoves, their stony gazes following Tidus as he stepped inside. The place had weight, not just physical, but spiritual. Tidus felt it press against his skin. This is where we pray, Waka said, kneeling before a raised dais. To Yevon. To the faith. Give thanks, yeah? Tidus scratched his head awkwardly. Sure. Thanks, Faith. A soft, amused sound made him turn. A woman stood near one of the pillars, her arms crossed. Her hair was dark and fell in precise, straight locks around her face. Her eyes were sharp, her expression cool as winter. You don't sound very convinced, she said. Tidus blinked. And you are? Lulu, Waka supplied quickly. She's our black mage. And she's got less patience than Scene has mercy, so watch yourself, yeah? Lulu's lips quirked almost imperceptibly at that, but her gaze didn't soften. You don't belong here, she said, her voice calm but cutting. Not just to this village. To this world. Tidus bristled. What's that supposed to mean? Before Lulu could reply, a low growl rumbled from behind him. Tidus spun and froze, A towering blue-furred creature stood there, feline and humanoid all at once, muscles like coiled steel beneath his fur. One golden horn curved from his forehead, gleaming in the temple light. His yellow eyes fixed on Tidus with a predator's focus. Hi, Tidus said weakly. The creature didn't answer. Kimahri, Lulu said, guardian to Yuna. Kimahri stepped closer, towering over Tidus, and for a moment Tidus thought he was about to get torn in half. Instead, Kimahri simply sniffed once, as though to memorize his scent, then turned away. He doesn't talk much, Waka said with a shrug. Before Tidus could respond, a bell chimed deeper in the temple. Waka straightened. She's coming. The great doors at the far end of the hall opened, and Yuna stepped through, staff in hand, her face serene. Behind her came Lulu and Kimahri, falling into step with practiced ease. Tidus's breath caught. She seemed to glow in the dim light of the temple, every movement graceful, almost otherworldly. Waka bowed his head, and Tidus, after a moment's hesitation, did the same. It is time, Yuna said softly, looking to her guardians. Time for what? Tidus asked, standing straight again. Waka glanced at him. Her pilgrimage, he said. Tidus frowned. Pilgrimage? To defeat sin, Lulu said, her tone matter-of-fact. A summoner travels the world, prays at the temples, gathers the final aeon. Then she faces sin. Tidus stared at them as though they'd all gone mad. You mean she's going to fight that thing? That thing that destroyed Zanarkand? Yes, Yuna said quietly. She smiled then, not bravely but gently, like someone comforting a frightened child. It's my duty, and my honor. Tidus felt the words like a stone in his chest. This girl, this kind, soft-spoken girl who had sat with him under the stars, was walking towards certain death, and everyone around her just accepted it. He wanted to shout that it was insane, that there had to be another way, but Yuna's calm gaze held him silent. For the first time, Tidus felt the full gravity of the world he'd fallen into, and he realized something that made his stomach twist. If he stayed with them, he was going to watch her walk toward her death. Chapter 7: Departure from Besaid. Morning came with the cry of gulls and the scent of salt on the wind. The village was already awake when Tidus stepped out into the sun. Yuna stood in the square, staff in hand, her guardians gathered around her. Waka, Lulu, and the silent, looming Kimahri. The villagers had come to see her off. Their faces were a mixture of pride and sorrow. They knew what it meant for a summoner to begin her pilgrimage. It meant she might never come home. Waka was grinning for her sake, joking with the younger Aurochs to keep their spirits up, but his eyes were tight, his smile strained. Lulu stood with arms folded, her expression as unreadable as ever, but Tidus noticed the faintest crease between her brows as she looked at Yuna. Even Kimahri, still as a statue, radiated a watchfulness that felt almost protective enough to be threatening. When Yuna turned to the villagers, her voice was clear, calm, the voice of someone who carried both hope and burden. I will do my best, she said, bowing her head. Please take care of Besaid while I am gone. The villagers nodded, some with tears in their eyes. Tidus shifted uneasily, watching the farewell unfold. It felt too heavy, too final, like they weren't just leaving for a trip, but stepping into something from which there was no return. And maybe they were. When the goodbyes were said, the group set out toward the forest path. Tidus followed, his feet dragging a little. So that's it? He asked Waka as they walked. We just go? That's how it is, Waka said with a shrug. The pilgrimage starts here. Once you leave, there's no looking back. Tidus glanced at Yuna, walking ahead of them, her staff glinting softly in the morning light. He couldn't explain why, but he felt a strange twist in his chest. Part worry, part admiration, part something else entirely. They passed under the archway of trees, and the village disappeared behind them. The forest was alive with the sound of rushing water and distant birdsong. Shafts of sunlight broke through the canopy, turning the air gold. It should have felt peaceful, but Tidus's nerves prickled as they walked deeper in. Keep sharp, Lulu said, her hand resting on the tip of her doll, ready to cast. Fiends are stronger outside the village. Sure enough, they didn't go far before the first of them appeared, wolf-like creatures with glowing red eyes leaping from the brush. Tidus barely had time to raise his sword before Wakka's blitzball smashed into the first fiend's face, sending it tumbling. Lulu's magic flared next, black fire consuming another. Kimari struck the last one down with a swift, brutal thrust of his spear. Tidus just stood there, blinking. "You people don't mess around," he said. "Get used to it," Lulu replied coolly. "Spearer is dangerous. You'll fight every step of the way." For a moment, Tidus almost wished he'd stayed on the beach. But then Yuna looked back at him with a smile, small, encouraging, as though she'd seen the hesitation on his face and wanted him to know it would be okay. Something about that smile kept him moving forward. By the time they reached the edge of the forest, the sun was high. The path opened onto a cliffside overlooking the ocean, and in the distance, Tidus saw their destination, a small dock where a ship waited, the ferry that would take them to Kilika. The wind whipped at their clothes as they approached. Wakka clapped Tidus on the back. "This is it," he said with a grin. "Once we're on board, you're part of the team." No backing out. Tidus gave him a crooked grin, though inside he wasn't sure he was ready for any of this. Yuna stepped onto the dock, pausing for a moment to look out at the sea. Her hair rippled in the breeze. "Ready?" Lulu asked quietly. Yuna nodded, and just like that, they boarded the ship. As the moorings were cast off and the sails caught the wind, Tidus stood at the rail, watching Besaid shrink into the horizon until it was just a speck of green in the endless blue. He didn't know if he'd ever see it again, but for the first time he felt something stirring inside him. Something that wasn't fear. Maybe it was hope. To be continued.